The time has come to talk about Castlevania Season 4. So this video is going to be entirely filled with spoilers. If you haven't seen the series yet, go check it out. But I do have another video on the channel that doesn't contain any spoilers and goes over the concept of the series, so you can decide if it's even the type of show that you'd like to watch. So I'm not normally the type of guy to watch things seasonally, and even when I am, I'm very rarely going to wait for the exact day something is about to come out and watch it immediately, but that was not the case for Castlevania. On release night, I sat there spamming refresh like a brand new graphics card was about to drop, and let me just say, this season was entirely worth the wait. Starting off, I didn't know prior to starting this season that this was slated to be the last season of the show, but I was told pretty early into watching it, and honestly, it had me a bit worried, as coming into the season there was a lot of unresolved issues. We had 4 separate plot lines going on, those being Hector and the Vampire Sisters, Isaac's quest, Trevor and Sifa doing adventurer stuff, and Alucard having a mental breakdown. But oddly enough, the pacing never suffered. The first 5 episodes sort of served as showing where the characters were at the moment and their current goals, and it wasn't until the 6th episode when Isaac started to siege Carmilla's castle that things really took off, and from there they never really stopped. It's actually shocking to me that the final climactic battle was able to take place 3 episodes later and every single character had their storylines tied off. Let's take some time to go over each character and how I felt about their arc. Before we do that though, I want to clarify that this isn't a recap of the story. I will be going over key points just for the purpose of giving my thoughts and opinions about them, but I'm going to assume that you've already finished the show if you're watching this video. If you haven't, here's your last spoiler warning. For convenience sake, due to the overlapping plot lines, I'm going to go in the order that they're resolved, and the first one of those is Isaac. Isaac may be the first to resolve, but he's also the least complex story of the main cast. I think it actually makes a lot of sense that Isaac would not want Dracula resurrected and want him to have time to rest alongside his wife. And it's pretty apparent that his chat with the sea captain and the other humans he's met along the way had a good influence on him, and it's a good idea for him to use these night creatures to benefit humanity instead of using them as soldiers to destroy things. When he eventually does lay siege to Carmilla, it's a pretty good payoff. I like that he forgave Hector, and conceptually I did like the battle with Carmilla. Summoners and necromancers are some of my favorite classes in typical fantasy, so having a Forge Master take on an extremely powerful vampire is really cool to watch. But this fight was probably the most noticeable in the category of leaning on the CG, which makes it look strictly worse right out the gate. However, it did feel like a good ending to Carmilla's story. Having her take herself out in a grand display of defiance is definitely something Carmilla would do. Striga and Marana had a pretty short showing, but Striga had one of the most visually impressive one-man army fight scenes in the season. As for the resolution of this storyline, I was actually pretty happy with their decision to just fuck off somewhere and be happy. Even though I wasn't overly emotionally invested in these characters, I am a sucker for happy endings, and I just wanted them to escape Carmilla's never-ending schemes. I guess the next to be actually resolved is Hector. Hector was the character that I went into Season 4 with the most emotional attachment to. I mean, he is definitely a monster person who was down to murder all of humanity, but he got gamed by the Vampire Sisters and I felt bad for him. It was a bit strange that he still seemed to have a romantic relationship with Lenore, because she was pretty unapologetically a monster to him, but whatever, I guess. It's also weird that cutting off his finger was an option, like, at all, because that's a pretty clear-cut answer, and I think most people would do that if they were in that situation. Otherwise, I think his story kind of played out without any real satisfaction. He freed himself, but he didn't get any revenge or make any moves, really. He just kind of got freed by Isaac and then vibed out for the rest of the runtime. I don't see why they didn't have Hector team up with Isaac in his battle with Carmilla, as that would be a great way to end both of their stories. I felt pretty similarly with Lenore's story. I did like the parallel between her being the step between Carmilla killing Hector, being mirrored directly with Hector being in between Isaac killing her. But I don't really get her decision to kill herself at the end. Maybe it's my ignorance on Castlevania lore, but couldn't she have just made Hector a vampire and then waited out Isaac's lifespan? Either way, it's a conclusion, and what I don't like about it is just me reading way too deep into it, and the objective parts about it were pretty good still. Sangermain actually played a pretty pivotal role, and I'd say he was the main active force driving the plot, and we finally got a look into his motivations surrounding the Infinite Corridor. Ever since he debuted in Season 3, I've been referring to him as a Time Lord, and I only felt more right about that assessment with each passing episode. It's not an overly groundbreaking story, a man who lost the love of his life, sacrificing himself and his morality to see her once more. But I did like his little speech near the end, at least until he ended it with that quip about having blue balls. I'd say that was more than out of place, but I'll let it go.
Very soon, he's going to have sex again.
Now, Alucard had a pretty interesting go. After the extremely traumatic shit he was put through, I was starting to worry about this guy. But right out the gate, even with Sumi and Taka's corpses freshly on pikes in front of his castle, he still chose to go to Dynasty and protect people, because no matter what comes Alucard's way, he's always going to have Lisa's compassion, and that's good characterization. It's almost a reflection of Lisa begging for Dracula to show mercy to the humans even when she was being burned to death, except Alucard's flames come from internal emotional trauma. I have heard a few people say that Greta of Dynasty is supposed to be like a female stand-in for Castlevania 3's Grant Dynasty, which makes a lot of sense, but as a rookie to the series, I don't know if I really have much to say on the matter. Pretty cool if it's true. I was happy to see that Alucard was able to move past the darkness he was dealing with and allegedly come up with a plan to settle Belmont, or Treffy, or whatever he decides to call it, right outside his castle. Alucard deserves at least a little happiness once in his damn near infinite life. Sifa and Trevor's story had me the most worried when it came to pacing. It seemed to be going along the same lines as Season 3, where they were just off doing some little side quests, and they were fun little side quests with some cute character interaction, but I was sure the whole time that they had to get to Dracula's resurrection. Thankfully though, they remained likable as they always are, so I wasn't really bothered by it. One thing I like about their dynamic is that the relationship is never artificially strained to fill time or create some form of drama. They just love each other, and they do have little squabbles, but that's it, and that's all there needs to be to have it be realistic. The fight between Trevor and Ratko was pretty cool, and it's not really ordinary for Trevor to take as many hits as he did in that fight. I also found it pretty neat how you could slowly see Trevor gaining more of his arsenal from the games. The holy water was in the background shot, and you needed to pay really close attention to even catch that he was doing it. The transition with Varney leading them to Alucard's castle was fine, I guess. It did seem a bit forced until the big reveal, which we will talk about now, and I will come back to Sifa and Trevor's resolution later. So the big twist was that Varney was death the entire time, and that's pretty wild, right? But what really threw me for a loop was the woman who gave Sangermain the key also being death. Did anyone see that shit coming, like, at all? Maybe she's a long-standing Castlevania character and I'm just an idiot, but the writers did an amazing job tying all of these incredibly individual character-driven narratives into one overarching plotline. I suppose Hector and Isaac's plot didn't cross over too heavily, as there was only a few small scenes about Hector assisting Varney, but still. I really liked Malcolm McDowell as Varney, but when he transformed into the literal embodiment of death, it threw me off a bit. Reflecting on that though, I like it a lot more than I thought I did in the moment. I definitely think it's a step up from if they just threw a spooky voice filter on it, and it's a whole lot more memorable just because of that decision.
I'm going to eat your soul, shit it out, and use it to smother your fucking girlfriend to death.
When the final battle rolled around, I instantly thought to myself that I wanted Trevor to deal the final blow to death. Not because I think he's the main character or anything, I actually think that title is split pretty evenly between him, Sifa, and Alucard. It's just thus far in the series, Alucard has gotten a majority of the important kills, and Sifa handles the rest of it pretty much. I wanted Trevor to finish him off, but I did not expect the isolation followed by a one-on-one. It truly embodied the feeling of battling a seemingly insurmountable boss in a video game, and the grand scale of the battle was awesome. I also love how Death didn't stop talking shit the entire time. If there is any issue that I have with this battle, it's that the exact abilities of the dagger Trevor used to kill Death was not specified ahead of time, so I can see an argument being made that it was a bit Deus Ex-y. Aside from that, with Dracula already defeated, this was about the only way the series could have ended, and I for one loved it. Now for the epilogue. I already went over Greta and Alucard's decision to found a town outside the castle, but Alucard also being protective over Sifa and wanting her to stay is a really good moment between the two of them. When Sifa announced that she was already pregnant, I thought to myself that Trevor was gone for good, because that solves the problem of Simon Belmont not being conceived yet. But then, Chekhov's horse rode back into town with Trevor in tow. I don't think this ruins any emotional impact, really. In fact, I think it more so acts as a form of redemption for Sangermain than anything else. With the attachment I have for this band of unlikely heroes, it was hard not to tear up alongside Sifa when she took the hood off of him. Even after an emotional moment like Trevor's return from death, they still nailed the humor on the head until the end. And finally, Dracula and Lisa being alive somehow. I don't think this was super necessary, like, at all, but I also don't really have a problem with it. As long as Lisa is with him, I think Dracula is fine and won't go all nuclear warhead on anyone. It doesn't really add anything, and it doesn't detract anything either. It's just a thing that happened, and I'm sure the fans of these two characters were pretty stoked on it. So, wrapping everything up, how did I feel about the season in general? Well, I'm not the sort of person who takes endings very well, especially when I've grown attached attached to the characters. I also realized that not every show can be dragged out forever, and if you do, it could spoil everything that made the show so special in the first place. That being said, with the sheer amount of content they had to work through and the storylines they needed to wrap up, I'm actually blown away that they were able to manage it. Realistically, the most plot important things were condensed into the section of episode 6 to episode 10, which is still the length of a feature film. But regardless, it's impressive to get through all that in that amount of time and not have it feel rushed. And the pacing in this show may be among the greatest I've ever seen. Up until the very last scene, Castlevania maintained its same quality of artistic design, humor, and character writing. I mean, I can't think of a single character in this show that I don't like, which is a massive feat. The closest it comes to me not liking someone is Carmilla, and that's just due to her being written to be unlikable, which does not count. There were some mild hiccups, of course. Like I said earlier, they did lean on the CG, especially during fight scenes, and I believe some of the fight scenes may have been animated at 12 frames per second for longer windows than the other 3 seasons, which could lead to them feeling laggy, but they're still extremely stylized and choreographed incredibly well. Overall, Castlevania is going to go down as one of my favorite shows of all time, up there with the likes of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Attack on Titan. I'm sure if I was a fan of the games or played through them at least once, I would have liked it that much more. What did you think of Castlevania Season 4? Do you agree with me? Is there anything that you think I'm a dumb idiot for saying? Leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to reply to every single one of them. If you like this video, subscribe for more. And also, if you're this far into the video, let me know how you feel about this format, with one video having spoilers and the other being spoiler free. I'm thinking about doing it for another wildly popular show that I just watched recently. Thank you for watching.